My name is Denise Walker, and I'm 58 years old. When I found out my own brother stole $95,000 from me, I thought that was the worst betrayal I could ever face. But a month later, the IRS called him, using my name. And that's when I realized karma doesn't always knock. Sometimes it calls. For most of my life, I believed that family was everything, that no matter how cruel the world could be, you could always count on blood to protect you. My younger brother, Alan, was proof of that. At least I thought he was. Alan was 6 years younger than me, and when we were kids, I practically raised him. Our father worked double shifts at a manufacturing plant, and our mother battled rheumatoid arthritis that kept her bedridden for years. So it was me who packed Alan's lunches, helped him with homework, and defended him from bullies who teased him for being small. "You're my favorite sister," he used to say, even though I was his only one. That loyalty, mine, not his, stayed with me well into adulthood. Even after he dropped out of college, bounced from job to job, and seemed allergic to responsibility, I still saw the boy who used to follow me around the neighborhood, clutching my hand and calling me sis. When I retired early last year after decades as an accountant, I finally felt free to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I'd spent most of my career helping other people manage their money wisely. I took my own advice, too, diversifying investments, avoiding debt, and slowly building a nest egg. Over time, I had accumulated $95,000 in long-term stock investments. That money wasn't just numbers on a screen. It represented years of missed vacations, long nights, and discipline. It was my future security. But life doesn't always respect plans. Just 3 months after retiring, I needed minor surgery to repair a torn rotator cuff. Nothing major, but enough to make using a computer difficult for a few weeks. I mentioned it offhand to Alan during one of our weekly calls. He'd been unusually attentive lately, checking in more often, offering to help with errands. "Don't worry about your accounts," he told me cheerfully. "I can handle logging in and checking them while you recover. Family's about sharing burdens, right?" I hesitated. I knew the risks of mixing family and finances, but he sounded so sincere, and I didn't want to offend him by implying I didn't trust him. So I gave him temporary access, just to monitor things. "Don't make any trades," I said firmly. "Just keep an eye on it." He laughed. "Relax, Dee. You think I'm going to run off with your millions?" I didn't have millions. I had $95,000 and faith in my brother. For a few weeks, everything seemed fine. He'd call to say my portfolio looked stable, that the market was doing well, and that he was proud of me for being so smart with money. It felt nice hearing that from him. For once, he wasn't the screw-up little brother I had to worry about. He was helping me. Then, about a month later, I logged into my investment account for the first time since the surgery. I almost thought I'd mistyped my password because the balance displayed was 0. Completely empty. I blinked, refreshed the page, tried again. Still 0. My heart thudded. A system error, I told myself. It had to be. Maybe the website was updating or under maintenance. I checked my email. Nothing. No notifications, no trade alerts. I called Alan immediately. He didn't pick up. I called again, straight to voicemail. Over the next 2 days, he avoided my calls entirely. When he finally answered, he sounded distracted. "Hey, Dee, sorry, been busy. What's up?" "Busy doing what? My account shows 0. Did you touch anything?" He hesitated just long enough for my stomach to twist. "Maybe it's a technical thing," he muttered. "Don't freak out. I'll look into it." "Alan, did you sell my stocks?" "Of course not," he said quickly. "You think I'd do that? Come on." His tone was defensive. Too defensive. Something inside me broke a little. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, a new email arrived from my brokerage. The subject line read, "Confirmation of transaction, account liquidation." The blood drained from my face. I opened it, scanning every word. My entire portfolio had been sold 3 days ago. All proceeds, $95,213.67, had been transferred to a linked checking account ending in numbers I didn't recognize. My hands trembled. I scrolled to the bottom, looking for the authorization form attached. There it was, a scanned document supposedly signed by me. Only it wasn't my handwriting. The signature curved upward in a flourish I'd seen 1,000 times before, on birthday cards, rent checks, and family letters. It was Alan's. I stared at the screen in disbelief as tears welled in my eyes. The same hand I'd held as a child now held my financial future hostage. My brother, the one person I would have trusted with my life, had cashed out everything I'd spent decades building. And the worst part? He'd done it with my permission. Or at least, with my access. I sat frozen, heart pounding, as the reality sank in. Alan hadn't just borrowed my money. He'd stolen it. But what I didn't know yet was that his betrayal would spiral far beyond stolen savings, because soon someone else would come calling, someone who thought I was him. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the screen until the numbers blurred together. My brokerage account balance still read 0 tonnies, as if my entire life savings had evaporated overnight. My coffee sat untouched. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely type. I called the brokerage firm again, demanding to speak with someone higher up. The first representative kept repeating the same rehearsed phrase. "Ma'am, according to our records, the transactions were authorized by you." Finally, I was transferred to a senior account manager, a polite man named Peter, who promised to review the details. He pulled up the authorization file and read off what he saw. My name, my date of birth, my social security number, and a digital signature that matched the one on file. All verification steps were successfully completed, he said, his voice calm and professional. But I didn't approve anything, I snapped. I didn't sell a single share. Someone forged my authorization. Peter paused. Ms. Walker, I understand this is upsetting, but everything in our system indicates that you initiated the liquidation and transfer. Even the ID upload matches your driver's license. My stomach dropped. What ID upload? He explained that, to confirm the transaction, a scanned copy of my driver's license had been uploaded through my account portal. It matched perfectly. I sat there, numb, as I realized how Alan must have done it. Flashbacks hit me one after another. Alan asking to borrow my ID just to help renew my car registration online. Alan offering to organize my documents while I recovered from surgery. Alan joking about how my signature looked too perfect. Each little moment that had seemed harmless suddenly became a puzzle piece snapping into place. Alan had stolen my identity right under my nose. I thanked Peter mechanically and ended the call, then sat in silence as the truth clawed at me. Betrayal didn't even begin to describe what I felt. This was something deeper, like watching someone you love tear out a piece of your heart and smile while doing it. I tried to call Alan again. He didn't answer. I texted him, "We need to talk. Now." No response. By evening, panic gave way to a slow, seething anger. I went through social media, searching for any sign of him. That's when I saw a new photo posted by his girlfriend, Candace. A grinning selfie of the two of them in front of a gleaming new red truck, captioned, "Finally living the good life." My chest tightened. The post was only 2 days old. The next image was of them at a beach resort, cocktails in hand, matching sunglasses, Alan's arm draped around her shoulders. The caption read, "Paradise with my man." I zoomed in on the photo, my eyes darting to the reflection in his sunglasses. It was the truck again, parked behind them. A new Ford F-150, at least $60,000. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking with fury. That was my money, my retirement, my security. When I finally got him on the phone later that night, my voice trembled. "Alan, what did you do with my investments?" He sighed, sounding irritated. "Dee, calm down. You're overreacting." "Overreacting? You drained my account. That's my money, Alan." "It's just money," he said coolly. "You're comfortable. You'll be fine." Those 3 words, "it's just money," burned into my mind like a brand. My baby brother, the boy I'd defended from bullies, now talked to me like a stranger. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" I whispered. He chuckled. "You weren't using it. I needed it more than you. Family shares, remember?" Then he hung up. I sat there staring at the silent phone, my ears ringing. It was as if every memory we'd ever shared had been rewritten into something ugly. I wanted to scream, to drive over to his house, to demand answers, but I couldn't bring myself to see him. Not yet. The next morning, I called my best friend, Nora. She'd known Alan since we were kids and had never trusted him the way I did. When I told her what happened, she didn't even sound surprised. "Oh, Denise," she sighed. "You've always tried to fix him, but this isn't a mistake. This is a crime." "I can't call the police," I said weakly. "He's my brother." Nora's voice hardened. "He stopped being your brother the moment he forged your name. You worked your whole life for that money. You have to report him." "But how do you report your own flesh and blood?" The idea made me sick. Part of me still hoped he'd call back, apologize, and make it right. Maybe he'd taken the money impulsively. Maybe he'd return it once he saw how much he'd hurt me. Days passed. No call. Instead, the silence in my house grew heavier, filled with the sound of my own thoughts looping endlessly. How could he? Why me? What did I do wrong? On the fourth day, just as I was making tea, a knock echoed from the front door. When I opened it, a mail carrier stood there holding a thick envelope marked Certified Mail, U.S. Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service. I signed for it, my heart pounding. Inside was a letter addressed to me, Denise Walker, but the contents made no sense. It mentioned unreported capital gains totaling $95,000, linked to a checking account I didn't own. I read it 3 times before the truth hit me like a punch to the chest. Alan hadn't just stolen my money, he'd used my name to cash it out. And now the IRS thought I was the one who owed them. I must have read that letter a dozen times before I believed what my eyes were showing me. Every line felt like it was written in a foreign language. Numbers, dates, penalties, legal jargon, all wrapped around one impossible accusation, that I owed taxes on a $95,000 gain. The letter even listed my social security number, my full legal name, my home address, everything matched me. At the bottom, in bold print, it read, "Failure to respond may result in the seizure of assets or garnishment of income." I felt my throat tighten as the words blurred. I'd spent 30 years advising people on how to avoid financial mistakes, how to stay compliant, how to trust the system. But the system didn't trust me now. According to the IRS, I was the thief. I called the number listed on the notice, hands shaking, after waiting on hold for nearly an hour. A calm-sounding woman named Agent Pierce answered. I explained everything. My stolen account, my brother, the forged authorization. She listened without interrupting, then said carefully, "Ma'am, all transactions were reported under your Social Security number. The brokerage reported the liquidation as your taxable gain." "I didn't authorize anything," I cried. "My brother forged my identity. He must have used my documents somehow." "I understand your frustration," she said gently. "But from our perspective, the money was deposited into an account linked to your SSN. Do you have documentation proving someone else accessed your funds?" My mind scrambled. "Not yet, but I can get it." "Then I recommend visiting your nearest IRS field office with any proof you have," she said. "The sooner we verify your claim, the better. Otherwise, collection procedures could begin automatically." Collection procedures. The phrase hit me like a hammer. I hung up, my heart pounding. The walls of my house felt like they were closing in. I imagined my credit destroyed, my accounts frozen, everything I'd worked for vanishing because of Alan's greed. When I finally found the strength to move, I gathered every file, statement, and email I could find, printing out the transaction records from the brokerage, the email confirmations, and even screenshots of the authorization document bearing Alan's forged signature. Then I drove an hour to the nearest IRS field office. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and paper. I took a number and waited among a crowd of weary faces, people with tax disputes, audits, debts. I felt like one of them, though I had done nothing wrong. When my number was called, I followed a stern-looking agent to a small cubicle. He introduced himself as Agent Morales. His voice was even, professional, almost kind. I handed him the folder I'd prepared and told him everything, from the moment I gave Alan temporary access to my account to the day I discovered the zero balance. He flipped through the papers quietly. "You said your brother's name is Alan Walker?" "Yes, he's 6 years younger. He's the one who took it all." Agent Morales tapped on his keyboard, then looked up. "Our records show that the funds were transferred into a checking account opened under your Social Security number, but the listed mailing address..." He paused, reading carefully. Is registered to an address in Springfield. Is that yours? My pulse quickened. No, that's Alan's house. He raised his eyebrows. So he created a bank account using your social security number and his address. That's identity theft, Ms. Walker. The words made my stomach twist. It wasn't just theft. It was impersonation. He hadn't only stolen my money. He'd stolen me. Agent Morales sat back in his chair, sympathetic but firm. You'll need to file a formal fraud affidavit immediately. We'll flag your SSN to prevent further misuse. I also recommend contacting a lawyer who specializes in financial crimes. A lawyer? I'd never needed one before. I left the office feeling both relieved and sick. Relieved because someone finally believed me. Sick because I knew what would come next. That night, I sat at my kitchen counter with my old leather address book open. My hands hovered over the number of a local attorney, James Hanley, who'd once handled a tax dispute for one of my former clients. I called him, and he agreed to meet the next morning. When I told him everything, he didn't sugarcoat it. Denise, your brother's actions fall under identity theft, wire fraud, and forgery. You have enough documentation to build a strong case, but you need to act fast. I don't want him in prison, I said quietly. I just want my name cleared. James looked at me over his glasses. If you file, he might go to prison anyway. That's not your fault. It's his. I sat in silence, torn between rage and guilt. I could still picture Alan as a boy, clinging to my hand, scared of thunderstorms. How had that boy grown into this man? Someone who would ruin his sister's life without blinking. James leaned forward. If you hesitate, the IRS will treat you as responsible for the gain. You'll be liable for back taxes, interest, and penalties. You could lose everything. I nodded slowly, tears pricking my eyes. Then I'll file. But I want to do it the right way. He gave me a reassuring smile and began drafting the paperwork. I felt a strange mix of fear and relief, as though I'd stepped onto a bridge that might collapse behind me at any second. The next week, I received a call from Agent Morales. His voice was less gentle this time. Ms. Walker, the IRS has opened an investigation into your case. However, he added gravely, unless you can prove that someone else benefited from those funds, we'll have to proceed as if you did. My breath caught. What does that mean? It means, he said, unless you prove otherwise, we'll have to seize your remaining assets next month. After the IRS call, I stopped crying. I stopped panicking. Something inside me, something quiet, hard, and precise, took over. I realized tears weren't going to bring my money back or clear my name. Numbers, evidence, and patience would. Those were the tools I'd spent my life mastering as an accountant. And now I would use them not for clients, but for myself. For the next several days, my dining table turned into a command center. Stacks of printed bank records, brokerage statements, and copies of every email I'd exchanged with Alan covered the surface. I labeled each stack with sticky notes: access, transactions, forgery, motive. It looked obsessive, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. I started retracing Alan's every move. I logged back into my brokerage account's history page and downloaded the entire access log. That's when I saw it: IP addresses that didn't match my location. Several logins came from his neighborhood, and even one from the resort he'd visited with Candace. Then, buried deep in my old laptop's email archives, I found something that made my stomach twist. A copy of an old email Alan had sent me, back when I'd asked for his help setting up two-factor authentication. Attached to that email was a file he'd claimed was a security tutorial. I'd never opened it then, but now when I did, I saw it contained saved images, photos of my driver's license, social security card, and even my brokerage ID card. He'd copied everything. I stared at those images, feeling a strange mix of disgust and awe. He hadn't just stumbled into this, he'd planned it. My own brother had built a digital version of me, ready to impersonate whenever convenient. That night, I called Nora and told her what I'd found. She came over immediately, still in her office clothes, carrying a bottle of wine and a folder of her own. Here, she said, sliding me a USB stick. This has screenshots of Alan's social media posts and the receipts he shared online, truck payments, resort bookings. If you cross-reference the dates, you'll have proof that the money trail matches your stolen funds. I couldn't help but smile. You'd make a good investigator, Nora. She grinned. Someone's got to keep you from doing something reckless. We spent the night compiling the ultimate file, one for the IRS and one for my lawyer, James. I even labeled the folder on my computer, Operation Wake Up Call. The next day, I met with James at his office. He flipped through the evidence, nodding approvingly. This is airtight, Denise. Between the login IPs, the forged ID scans, and the paper trail from the brokerage, we can prove identity theft beyond doubt. I leaned forward. So what happens now? Now, he said, we let the IRS and law enforcement handle it. But don't tell Alan you know. Let him think he's gotten away with it. People like him always get comfortable when they believe they're untouchable. That stuck with me. Alan always bragged when he thought he'd outsmarted someone. He loved to show off. He couldn't resist it. So I decided to use that against him. Over the next 2 weeks, I started calling him again. I made my voice soft, hesitant, even forgiving. Alan, I said one night, I overreacted. You were right. It's just money. I don't want this to tear us apart. He hesitated, then laughed with that smug tone that used to make me grit my teeth. CD, I told you. I knew you'd come around. I could almost hear his relief. He thought the storm had passed. That was good. A few days later, I even visited him. Candace answered the door wearing a diamond bracelet that gleamed too brightly to be anything but new. Alan was in the living room, lounging. With a beer in hand, the TV playing some reality show he wasn't watching. Look who's here, he said, pretending to sound surprised. The prodigal sister returns. I smiled tightly. Just wanted to clear the air. He smirked. You should have called sooner. You worried me, all that talk about lawyers. Forget it, I said. You were just helping me out, right? Family shares, like you said. He grinned, tapping his beer can against the armrest. Exactly. You always make a big deal out of nothing. As he talked, I studied him. The arrogance, the self-satisfaction, the false charm. I noticed something new, too. A hint of fear underneath. Maybe he'd sensed the walls closing in. Maybe some part of him knew karma was already circling. Over the next few visits, I played the part of the forgiving sister perfectly. I listened to him brag about his new business venture, buying and flipping used trucks. He even showed me spreadsheets he'd made. Cheap, sloppy ones. Nothing like the meticulous reports I used to handle. But what caught my attention most wasn't the numbers. It was the email signature at the bottom of one of his documents. The signature line read, Alan Walker, Consultant, Walker Financial Group. The contact email, Denise, Walker, Finance, Agmail.com. He was still using my name. My heart thudded, but I didn't show it. I just smiled. Looks impressive. He leaned back, proud. Even the IRS thinks you're me now, he said with a drunken laugh. The word sent a chill down my spine. I kept smiling, pretending to laugh with him, while inside, something cold and deliberate settled into place. He thought he was untouchable, but soon he'd learn what it really meant to have the IRS think he was me. 2 weeks after my last visit to Alan's house, I got a call from Agent Morales. His voice carried that careful tone investigators use when they're trying to sound neutral, but are actually holding back something significant. Ms. Walker, he said, I wanted to inform you that the IRS's Identity Theft Division has flagged additional suspicious activity under your Social Security number. My stomach tightened. What kind of activity? Multiple wire transfers, he explained, originating from a checking account in your name, but funded through a separate account at a credit union in your brother's area. It seems your identity is being used again. I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying to stay calm. So, what happens now? Well, he continued, normally we'd contact the account holder for questioning, meaning you. But since we're aware of the identity theft, we're using this opportunity to confirm the perpetrator's behavior. We'll be calling the number attached to that fraudulent account. My breath caught. You mean Alan's number? Yes, Morales said. He listed it as yours. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. My brother had stolen my name, my savings, and my identity. But now he'd also volunteered his own number while pretending to be me. What will you say when you call him? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and anticipation. We'll identify ourselves as IRS investigators calling to verify income statements, Morales said smoothly. He'll think it's a routine audit. If he answers as you, we'll record the call. That will be the evidence we need to finalize your fraud claim. When I hung up, my heart was racing. Nora came over that evening after work, and I told her everything. She poured 2 glasses of wine and raised hers toward me. "To poetic justice," she said. I smiled faintly. Let's just hope it works. The following afternoon, I sat at home with my phone next to me, waiting for an update. Around 4 o'clock, Morales texted a single line, "Call placed." I could barely breathe. I imagined Alan lounging in his living room, beer in hand, answering the phone without a care in the world. "Hello?" he probably said, with that casual arrogance he always had. Then Morales's calm voice. "Good afternoon, Ms. Denise Walker. This is Special Agent Morales with the Internal Revenue Service. We're calling to verify your recent reported transactions totaling $95,000. Is this a good time to talk?" For a few seconds, Alan must have frozen. Morales later told me there was an awkward silence before Alan cleared his throat. Yes, this is Denise." His voice pitched higher, uncertain. Morales went on, asking routine verification questions. "Can you confirm your date of birth, Ms. Walker? And the address associated with your account?" Alan rattled off my birth date correctly. It was probably still on the documents he'd stolen. But when Morales asked about the address, Alan gave his own. There was a pause. Morales told me later he almost smiled when he heard it. "Thank you," the agent said smoothly. "Just to verify, Ms. Walker, you still live in Springfield, correct?" Alan hesitated again. Yes, that's right." The IRS team was recording everything. Morales told me his colleague, Agent Pierce, silently mouthed the word, "Got him." Next came the verification question only I would know. "Ms. Walker, can you confirm the name of your first employer listed on your original tax filing in 1988? Alan stammered. Wait, which, I don't have that on me." Morales pretended not to notice the panic creeping into his voice. "That's all right, ma'am," he said. "We can review that in person. We'd just like to schedule a follow-up meeting at your address to verify identification. Would tomorrow morning at 10 work for you?" Alan, clearly rattled, muttered, "Yeah, sure, whatever." "Excellent," Morales said. "We'll see you then, Ms. Walker." And then he hung up. When Morales called to tell me what happened, I couldn't stop smiling. My heart felt lighter than it had in months. "You're setting him up," I said quietly. He didn't deny it. "We're simply confirming an identity, ma'am. And based on the evidence you've provided, I think we'll have the confirmation we need very soon." My lawyer, James, called later that evening. "They want you to keep acting as though nothing's changed," he said. "Don't confront him. Don't tip him off. Let him think the world still believes his lies." I promised I would. The next day, I went to Alan's house again. Candace was gone this time, but Alan greeted me with his usual smirk. "Look who keeps coming back," he teased. "Couldn't stay mad at me forever, huh?" I forced a smile. "You're still my brother," I said softly. He laughed, leaning back on his couch. "That's the spirit. No point crying over money that's already gone." We talked idly about nothing for a while. I acted relaxed, pretending I wasn't counting the hours until his appointment with the IRS. When I stood to leave, he walked me to the door, half drunk, half proud. "Hey, Dee," he said, slurring slightly. "You ever think maybe you were too uptight? You gotta learn to play the system sometimes. Even the IRS thinks I'm you now." The words hung in the air like smoke. I smiled, careful not to let my voice shake. "You're right, Alan," I said quietly. "Maybe it's time the system learned to play back." The morning of the meeting, I could barely sip my coffee. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, even the wind against the window, felt amplified, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. At precisely 9:30, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Agent Morales. "We're in position. Stay by your phone." I was sitting in my lawyer's office by then. James had insisted I be there while the sting unfolded, in case anything unexpected happened. He set his tablet on the desk, a secure video feed already open. Morales had arranged for the local authorities to accompany him during what was officially labeled a routine identity verification. In reality, it was the moment everything came full circle. The video showed Alan's front yard, neat lawn, bright truck gleaming in the driveway, a life financed by someone else's sacrifice. 2 IRS agents and a local police officer approached his door. Alan opened it, wearing gym shorts, a t-shirt, and that same smug look I'd grown to despise. He clearly hadn't expected anyone important. "Good morning," Morales said politely. "Are you Ms. Denise Walker?" Alan blinked, caught off guard for just a second before regaining his composure. Yeah, that's me." Morales kept his face neutral. "We appreciate your time. We're here to review recent account activity tied to your tax identification. May we come in?" Alan stepped aside, still pretending confidence. "Sure, come on in. Can I get you something to drink?" From my lawyer's office, I couldn't help but smirk. I'd seen that act before. The charm, the fake politeness. He always thought he could talk his way out of anything. The agent sat at his dining table. Morales placed a folder down and opened it slowly. "Before we proceed, Ms. Walker, we just need to confirm a few details for the record." Alan leaned back casually. "Fire away." "Your date of birth?" Morales asked. Alan hesitated, glanced at the papers in front of him, then rattled off my birth date. "Your social security number?" Morales continued. Alan paused longer this time, fumbling the last digits. Morales made a note. "And your address?" Alan, thinking fast, gave his Springfield address again. That's when Morales closed the folder, folded his hands, and said calmly, "Mr. Walker, you are under investigation for identity theft, wire fraud, and tax evasion. Anything you say can and will be used against you." Alan froze. "Wait, what? Who?" Morales looked him in the eye. "You, sir, or should I say, Denise Walker?" James chuckled beside me, shaking his head. "Classic." On the feed, Alan jumped to his feet, knocking his chair over. "This is insane. I didn't steal anything. I am Denise Walker." One of the officers stepped forward, his tone firm but calm. "Sir, please sit down." Alan's face flushed red. He grabbed his phone. "I'm calling my lawyer." Morales nodded. "Go ahead. Which lawyer? Ms. Walker's, perhaps?" Alan froze mid-dial. At that moment, Candace walked in from the hallway, her face pale. "Alan, what's going on?" he stammered. They think I'm—" Morales interrupted smoothly. "He claims to be his sister, Ms. Denise Walker. Do you happen to know if that's true?" Candace's mouth fell open. "His sister? What are you talking about?" Morales gestured toward a printed page. "Ma'am, your boyfriend used his sister's social security number and identity to liquidate nearly $100,000 from her retirement investments. He's been filing under her name." Candace's expression hardened. "Oh my God." She stepped back, shaking her head. "You used your sister's money for our trip? For the truck?" Alan tried to reach for her, but she slapped his hand away. "You're disgusting," she spat before storming out of the house. Watching from the feed, I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just felt a deep, steady calm wash over me. Karma had arrived, punctual and precise. Alan, meanwhile, was unraveling fast. "You can't prove anything," he shouted. "You have no idea." Morales clicked a small remote, and suddenly Alan's own voice filled the room. Recorded from the phone call where he'd pretended to be me. Yes, this is Denise," the voice stammered. "I live in Springfield." Alan's face went pale. Morales tilted his head slightly. "That you, Ms. Walker?" Alan's lips parted, but no sound came out. The silence was louder than any confession. The officers stepped forward, cuffed him gently, and read his rights. The words rolled out mechanically. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." James leaned back in his chair beside me, exhaling. "That's that." I nodded slowly, my eyes glued to the screen. Alan looked smaller now, like a frightened version of the boy I once protected. When the feed ended, Morales called me directly. "It's done," he said simply. "He's being charged with identity theft, forgery, and tax fraud. The evidence you provided made the difference." "Thank you," I whispered. "Truly." He hesitated before adding, "There's one more thing, Ms. Walker." I frowned. "What is it?" "There may be a way to reclaim your stolen funds," he said, "but it's complicated." The line crackled with static and his voice lowered. "You'll need to come in tomorrow morning. We've uncovered something new in his financial records." I felt my pulse quicken again, not from fear this time, but from curiosity. What did you find? I asked. He paused. Let's just say your brother didn't stop with one account. It took 6 long months of paperwork, phone calls, and sleepless nights, but justice finally caught up to Alan. During that time, I became an expert at bureaucracy. Every form, every affidavit, every notarized statement. Piece by piece, I rebuilt the life my brother had dismantled. When the letter from the IRS finally arrived clearing me of all liability, I cried harder than I did the day he was arrested. The words, "case closed, victim of verified identity theft," felt like a baptism. My name, my identity, was mine again. The government returned the bulk of the stolen funds after recovering what remained from Alan's seized accounts. It wasn't everything. Some had been spent, of course, but it was enough to make me feel whole again. I took what I could and moved it into a new trust under strict legal protection. My lawyer, James, oversaw every signature personally. I wasn't going to let anyone, even family, have that kind of access to me. When Alan's trial came, I didn't attend the sentencing. I thought about it, even dressed for it once, but I couldn't bring myself to go. I didn't want to look at him in handcuffs, not because I pitied him, but because I didn't want his last memory of me to be one of guilt or tears. I wanted him to remember my silence, the silence of someone who no longer cared to explain herself. He was given 4 years in a minimum security facility for identity theft, wire fraud, and falsifying financial documents. The judge called it a calculated betrayal motivated by greed. I couldn't have phrased it better. The news reached our mother a few days later. She called me in tears, her voice trembling. "Denise, he's your brother," she said. "He made a mistake, but prison? That's too far." I closed my eyes, holding the phone tightly. "He didn't just make a mistake, Mom. He made a choice, and now he gets to live with it." She begged me to visit him. I told her no. She said forgiveness was the only way to heal, but I had learned something different. Forgiveness without accountability is just permission. Nora was the only one who understood completely. When I told her about my mother's call, she smirked, shaking her head. "Let me guess. She thinks you should drop the charges and bake him cookies?" I laughed softly. "Something like that." Nora leaned back in her chair, studying me. "You did the right thing, Dee. You protected yourself. And maybe, just maybe, you taught him a lesson no one else ever could." Her words stayed with me. For decades, I'd played the role of protector, shielding Alan from consequences, from debt collectors, from his own bad choices. I used to think that was love. But real love, I realized, isn't about saving someone who refuses to save themselves. It's about stepping back and letting the world show them what you couldn't. Life slowly returned to normal. I took up gardening again, rejoined my book club, even started volunteering part-time at a local women's financial literacy center. There was something deeply healing about teaching other women how to protect their money, their signatures, and their peace of mind. One autumn afternoon, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox, the return address from the correctional facility. For a long time, I just stared at it. My instinct was to throw it away unopened, but curiosity won. The letter inside was written in Alan's familiar scrawl. Messy, slanted, a mix of apology and accusation. "You didn't have to ruin my life, Dee. You could have helped me. You knew I was struggling. You chose revenge instead. I hope you're happy." I read it twice, then set it down. He still didn't get it. To him, this wasn't about choices or consequences. It was about blame. He had traded empathy for entitlement long ago. I folded the letter neatly, placed it on the fireplace grate, and struck a match. The flames licked at the edges, curling his words into smoke until nothing remained but ash. Watching it burn felt final, like closing a door on the part of me that still hoped he'd ever change. That night, as the fire died down, I sat in silence, sipping tea and feeling something close to peace. I thought it was over, that the story was done. Then, just after midnight, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code made my stomach tighten. It was from the correctional facility. I hesitated, debating whether to answer. Finally, I pressed accept. A man's voice came through. Calm, unfamiliar. "Ms. Walker, my name's Darren. I'm Alan's cellmate." I froze. "Yes?" He paused. "He asked me to call you before something happened. He said there's something you need to know." My heart dropped. "What do you mean, something happened?" There was a moment of silence, just the faint hum of background noise from wherever he was calling. "Let's just say," Darren said slowly, "your brother wasn't finished trying to fix his mistakes." The line crackled, then went dead. I sat there in the dark, phone still pressed to my ear, wondering what Alan had done this time, and why, even behind bars, he still couldn't let me have peace. I barely slept that night. The voice of Alan's cellmate, Darren, echoed in my head like a riddle I couldn't solve. He said, "There's something you need to know." The way he'd spoken, measured, deliberate, told me this wasn't some prank or cryptic message. Whatever Alan had done, it wasn't over. By morning, I decided to call the correctional facility directly. After being transferred 3 times, I was finally connected to the administrative office. "I'm calling about an inmate, Alan Walker," I said. "I received a call last night from someone claiming to be his cellmate." The woman on the other end confirmed Darren's name and that he'd been released on a temporary work program that week. "If he called you," she said, "he probably had permission. Inmates sometimes ask friends or family to pass messages." That didn't make me feel better. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number appeared. "It's Darren. Sorry if I scared you last night. I didn't know another way to reach you. Can we talk?" I hesitated, but finally called him back. His voice was calm, even respectful. "Ms. Walker, I was Alan's cellmate for about 9 months. He talked about you a lot." I exhaled shakily. "Let me guess. Not kindly?" Darren gave a soft chuckle. "That's fair to say. He blamed you for everything, said you stole his future. But that's not why I called. Before I got transferred, he asked me to help him with something that sounded wrong." My pulse quickened. "What did he ask you to do?" "He had this plan," Darren said. "He'd been bragging about setting up another account in your name. Said he had the paperwork ready before he got arrested, just needed someone on the outside to activate it. He said the system still recognized your info as linked to him. He wanted me to find someone who could move money through it for a cut." I felt my breath hitch. "You're saying he still had access to my information?" "Not exactly," Darren replied. "He didn't have access, but he thought he did. Said you were too careful now, but he'd find a way around it. He had that obsessive thing. He couldn't let go of the idea that you won. He wanted to prove he could beat you, even from behind bars." I felt a wave of nausea. Alan had always been competitive, but this was something darker. A sickness. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked softly. Darren hesitated. "Because I've been trying to go straight since I got out. And because, honestly, I liked you from the stories he told, before they turned bitter. You didn't deserve what he did." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you for warning me." "Just make sure your accounts are locked down," he said. "All of them." He had details about some kind of old savings plan, said it was still in your name. After we hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen for a long time. My fingers trembled as I began checking every financial account I still owned: banks, investments, insurance, retirement. Then I logged into a savings account I hadn't touched in years, one that had been dormant since before my retirement. For a moment, everything looked normal. Then I noticed something strange. A new user ID had been created last month, labeled D. Walker Secondary Access. My stomach flipped. Darren was telling the truth. I immediately called my lawyer, James, and explained what I'd found. He moved faster than I'd ever seen him. "Send me screenshots," he said. "Don't delete anything yet. We'll report this through the proper channels." By that evening, the bank had frozen the account pending investigation. The fraud department confirmed that someone had attempted to initiate a transfer, but it had failed when the ID verification didn't match. "Whoever it was," the specialist told me, "they had enough of your data to trigger security protocols. Good thing you had the trust in place. Otherwise, this would have gone through." I felt a grim sense of vindication. Alan's plan had collapsed before it even began. A week later, I learned that Darren had given a formal statement to investigators, describing Alan's failed scheme in full detail. He even handed over a letter Alan had written to him outlining the steps. That testimony earned Darren early parole. When I saw a copy of that letter, I couldn't help noticing the same cocky handwriting Alan used as a teenager. One line in particular burned itself into my mind. "She thinks she's smarter than me. I'll always be one step ahead. She'll never really beat me." It was equal parts pathetic and chilling. He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted dominance. That was all he'd ever understood. For the first time, I stopped feeling guilty about not visiting him. Some people can be saved. Alan wasn't one of them. Instead, I focused on rebuilding what he'd tried to destroy. I met with James weekly, restructured my finances, even signed up for digital security monitoring. Every step I took to protect myself felt like taking back another piece of my life. And slowly, the noise in my head, the anger, the disappointment began to fade. I wasn't living in reaction to him anymore. I was living beyond him. Then, just as I started to believe the storm had finally passed, another envelope appeared in my mailbox. It was from the IRS again, thick and official looking. But this time, when I looked at the label, I froze. The letter wasn't addressed to me. It read, Alan Walker, and underneath, my address. I turned it over slowly in my hands, a chill creeping up my spine. Why was the IRS writing to him? At my house? When I opened the envelope addressed to Alan but sent to my house, I braced myself for yet another twist, another mess of his making that I'd have to untangle. The weight of it felt familiar in my hands, the seal crisp, the return address from the U.S. Department of the Treasury. For a second, I almost laughed. Of course. Even from prison, Alan had a way of finding his way back into my life. But when I slid it open and unfolded the papers inside, what I read stopped me cold and then, unexpectedly, made me smile. The letter wasn't about me at all. It was addressed to Alan Walker, but the first line began with, Dear Ms. Denise Walker, regarding your prison employment and taxable wages? I reread it twice, just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. The IRS system had officially mistaken Alan for me. His own fraud, the identity theft he'd built so carefully, had come full circle and trapped him inside the lie he'd created. According to the letter, his inmate work wages and commissary credits had been logged under my Social Security number, the same number he'd stolen months ago. Every cent he earned behind bars was being recorded as Denise Walker's income. And because I'd already been cleared of all liability, those wages were being automatically applied to my account as an overpayment credit. I couldn't help it. I laughed, out loud. Karma didn't always come loud or flashy. Sometimes it came on government letterhead. When I called James, my lawyer, to show him the letter, he chuckled the way only a man who's seen too many bureaucratic miracles could. Looks like the system finally gave you a win, he said. He used your name so many times, it's legally tangled. The IRS now thinks he's you for everything in their correctional database. So, what happens now? I asked. Well, James replied, flipping through the documents. Technically, his prison earnings will continue to pay down your overpayment balance until his ID record is corrected, which could take years. Years. Alan had spent so long trying to make me pay for his mistakes that he'd literally arranged it so he would be paying me. I leaned back in my chair, shaking my head. He always wanted to take care of me, I said dryly. James smirked. Guess he finally is. When I hung up, I sat there in the quiet, feeling the strangest peace wash over me. There was no more rage left, no more grief or disbelief, just stillness, the kind that comes when you realize the universe has handled the punishment far better than you ever could. I decided then that I wouldn't let the last remnants of Alan's choices define me anymore. Instead, I'd use what I had reclaimed, not just the money, but the lesson, to help others avoid what I went through. A month later, I donated part of my recovered funds to a women's financial literacy nonprofit. They helped retirees, single mothers, and women starting over after betrayal or loss. As I signed the check, I told the director, I'm not giving this out of pity. I'm giving it out of gratitude, because I finally learned the value of protecting yourself. She smiled warmly. Then you're exactly the kind of woman who should come speak to our next group. So I did. Standing in that small community center, telling my story to a room full of women who'd been scammed, manipulated, or underestimated, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. They listened not with pity, but with understanding. And as I spoke, I realized that revenge had never been the true ending of my story. Peace was. Weeks later, I drove to the cemetery where my parents were buried. The autumn air was cool and steady, the leaves brittle under my shoes. I stood between their headstones, hands clasped, and whispered softly, I finally protected the family again, in my own way. I stayed there a long while, letting the wind carry the rest of what I couldn't say. When I turned around, Nora was waiting by the car, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "Knew I'd find you here," she said, handing one to me. "Old habits," I said with a smile. "I just wanted to tell them it's over." Nora nodded toward the distant sunset. "It's over when you say it's over, Dee. And from where I'm standing, it looks like you won." We sat on the hood of my car, sipping coffee, as the sky turned gold and violet. "I used to think revenge meant getting even," I said quietly. "Now I think it means finding peace while they stay stuck in their chaos." Nora grinned. "You've got the last laugh, girl. The IRS literally pays you now because of him. That's poetic justice." I laughed softly. "Yeah, he took my name, my trust, and my money, but I took back my peace." As the sun dipped below the trees, I felt a deep calm settle inside me, a kind of closure no courtroom or apology could ever give. Alan would live out the rest of his sentence under the shadow of his own lies, paying debts he created. And me? I'd spend the rest of my days free, not just from his manipulation, but from the weight of trying to fix someone who never wanted to be fixed. For the first time in years, I felt truly safe, truly myself. It didn't end with revenge. It ended with peace. In the end, Alan lost everything. Not because I punished him, but because life did. He thought stealing my name would give him power, but it only erased his own. I didn't need revenge. I just needed it, and I finally have it now. Sometimes karma doesn't come with thunder. It comes quietly, wrapped in justice. Tell me something. If someone you love betrayed you, this deeply, would you forgive them or let karma answer for you? If my story made you feel something today, stay a little longer. There are more truths like this waiting to be told. Every story here carries a piece of someone's lesson, maybe even yours. Share it with someone who still believes family can't betray blood. And before you go, tell me in the comments, what would you do if karma called your name next?